Hello, I'm Hushcho. Welcome to Let's H. Both Black Goats and Ball, Book and Candle have updated this week. Go to longlibrary.com to check out Black Goats. It's full of magic, hot dudes, and fantasy. That's at longlibrary.com. longlibrary.com. Ball, Book and Candle is at the Splash Pages, which is light kink, but lots of romance and sweetness and sensuality. That's at thesplashpages.com. There will be links in the blurb, so check it out today. After last time reviewing the series opener technically, for American Horror Story Hotel, I was told that I had to do the second episode, so I decided to do it. Fair warning though, this may be the last one I watch because it was really bad. Last time I had at least a good bit to take notes on. This time, most of it was just spent kind of being bored. Honestly, some of the advert breaks were more interesting than what was happening on screen, which is really sad to me. We have Sally Nicotine, or whatever the hell her name is, crying all the damn time this episode. Like, there is not a single scene where she's not crying, and that's fine and everything, but her character needs to have more going on than crying. This episode was called Chutes and Ladders, and I don't really know why. Really, I would call it more poop shoot and something else. I don't know. But it really was a real poop shoot. It was so boring and so awful. Like, it varied between incredibly boring and annoyingly trying too hard. We start off with Mustang Sally. I still can't remember her fucking name. We start off with Sarah Paulson's character sewing the heroin junkie dude from the first episode into a mattress. This doesn't make any sense. He does this thing, and that doesn't make sense either. It doesn't matter. It's like they had him there. They even gave him a guest star credit. He's on the screen for maybe like 2 seconds, and he doesn't even have a fucking line. That's what really is so annoying about it. Like, he's a really interesting character, probably because he's one of the few people in this who's actually bothering to act, and he's only in like, I don't know, 2 seconds of the entire episode. So we get back to these annoying vampire brats, or whatever the fuck they're supposed to be. Inga 2 dies, and basically they just dump her in the basement with laundry detergent or something. I don't know. I don't know how they think that this is not going to be something that people pick up on. Like, even at one point, like not 5 minutes into the episode, Sarah Paulson's character comes down and is like, hey, look, you can hear through the vents this girl is calling for help. We've got a cop staying here. And the Kathy Bates character is like, oh, he's at work now. Well, what if he wasn't? Like, what if you fucked up? You're so cavalier. She's so cavalier despite the fact that in the previous episode, Gaga was like, this can never happen again. Well, maybe you should take some precautions? I don't know. It's just kind of odd to me that there seems to be this threat that we're supposed to take as implicit, yet nobody seems to care to keep their fucking motor hotel a secret, just like I said in the last episode. And now they're calling attention to the fact that they're not doing that. How are we going to last for 13 episodes of trying to keep this motor hotel a secret if literally no one is actually bothering to make the effort? It's not going to happen. We have a weird tangent too with the boring-ass camp gay detective's wife giving us a PSA about vaccines. We don't really need to know this. We have no investment in this family. We have no real investment in the guy's wife. I know a friend of mine likes the actress, but she doesn't have a lot to work with here, and there's no reason why we should give two shits what her life is like and what's happening in her life. It doesn't matter, ultimately. It makes absolutely no difference material or otherwise, what is happening in her life and what sort of adversity she comes up against. All we have is Mädchen Emick, who reminds me of Twin Peaks, a far better series, even in its weakest moments, and makes me sad that I'm watching American Horror Story instead of my Twin Peaks videos. We go back to the boring-ass detective talking with Mustang Sally, and he recounts some flashback thing, which also reads as a PSA. It's like, oh, it's the dangers of carbon monoxide. I don't watch a show called American Horror Story for PSAs on anti-vaxxers and carbon fucking monoxide. I know about them. I especially don't watch them to see boring, bland flashbacks that don't really have any bearing on the story now. It's way too soon in this series for an episode consisting entirely of flashbacks and characters and situations we aren't invested in. Why can we not just focus on what's happening here at the moment? So much of this episode is taken up by stupid flashbacks. This could have been called Poop, Chutes, and Flashbacks, for all I care, because that's exactly what it seems to be. A bunch of crap and flashbacks. Crappy flashbacks. And Sally is actually kind of interesting. This is the first character played by Sarah Paulson I can remember whom I don't absolutely despise. That's good, that's nice, I'm glad. However, you would think the continuity could get the shots right so that her cigarette would not be in inconsistent ash between shots. If you watch it, there's one shot that's more up close where clearly she hasn't ashed her cigarette at all because it's a perfect ash cylinder down to a point. Then it cuts from that, and it's already been ashed. Then it cuts back, and it's been ashed, but at a different point. Then it cuts back to the far shot, and it's been ashed at a different point. I understand that as a cigarette, it would be kind of difficult to keep it at exactly the same ash, since it is a burning thing, so shots can't be always set up in the same way. But you could at least have the cigarette burn down consistently. You don't even have that. Next, we have the most embarrassing fashion show and the most stereotypical in the history of fashion shows. Yes, they even play Brian Ferry's Don't Stop the Dance. I'm going to give you a moment just to stop laughing so that you can hear what I have to say next. Because if you know this song, you will know they play it at every fucking stereotypical fashion show ever. We also have an embarrassing, stereotypical model who's written about as well as you would think a stereotypical cardboard cutout model would be. Oh, of course he's a dangerous bad boy that really didn't want to be a model, and of course he's strung out on drugs. Ooh-ah. And he picks a fight during the fucking fashion show. The bizarre thing is that Camp Gay Detective's daughter is there, and apparently they're, invited to this, and this fashion designer has a son, which is just about as unlikely as the hotel having a website, and they have pretty much no real chemistry together. Oh, and of course she gets involved investigating the hotel, which has this surreal quality about it, but is just about as boring as when Model Dude decides to cut himself, quit modeling, and gets lost in the hotel. If it sounds interesting, that's because I'm basically talking up the most interesting parts of it. It's not interesting at all. We do get Evan Peters in an odd role that is kind of different from his usual. Nice to see him kind of break out, but it doesn't really make much sense and it's not really that interesting. Kind of like the whole show so far. What really bothers me, though, is the fact that this is a series for adults. Supposedly. It may be an incredibly immature, flat series that writes like a tween wrote it, but it's still supposed to be a series for adults. We really shouldn't have to have characters that are like 8 years old being the main protagonists for any element of the story. I won't say that the child actors are great, but they are at least better than 90% of the adult cast. Even Kathy Bates is remarkably flat here, and I know she's a good actress. She's an award-winning actress who is usually excellent. It's like she's not even trying. When later she has to tell a story, it's like she's reading from the script right then and there. It's like they didn't have enough time or give anybody enough time to learn the script, so they had it hung on a pasteboard or something, and they're just reading it off of the floor or something. I don't know. It's so dull. Maybe it's the direction, maybe it's the writing. I think it's probably a combination of both. It's not really fun to watch. It's just boring and frustrating. Oh, and there's some woman from Vogue, supposedly, who, I don't know if we're supposed to think is in some sort of relationship with the fashion designer asshole, but we don't care, and she has the fakest accent ever. This isn't even trying. This is like middle school drama club level. This isn't even, yeah, it's passable. It's more like, yeah, you need to lose the accent because it's so fake, it's really grating. Every time she pops up, it's just wince-worthy. It's cringe-worthy. And she's not a good actress, so she can't really sell you on her being who she says she is. She seems like a background character from Absolutely Fabulous that's been wandering around for the past 20 years. In any case, the daughter of Camp Gay Detective finds her brother and really isn't that excited about it. She takes a selfie with him and eventually reunited with her parents, who are, perhaps unsurprisingly, a bit concerned. The mother is, as usual, an asshole, but she kind of has a point as to why exactly the daughter seems to be left constantly unattended and left to her own designs. If one of your kids was abducted, wouldn't you kind of be a bit overprotective of the other one? Wouldn't you kind of not let that other kid get out of your sight? Yeah, I know both parents work and everything, but there's got to be a better solution than this. One of them is a doctor. The other is a police officer, a detective. It's not like they can't afford a nanny or a babysitter or something like that. And yet they keep leaving their kids to whatever. These are not kids that are really old enough to be fending for themselves. It just makes it even more difficult to sympathize with them or even care about them. And we don't. They spend so much time on screen, but ultimately we don't care about the detective, his family, his sad history, or any of the PSAs that the writer tries to use that family to deliver. They're not interesting. They're not even interesting as the people in Murder House. Like, seriously, they're that dull. They're less interesting than the people in the Murder House, whom we know we're going to die. Let that sink in a bit. You might have noticed that I've been avoiding the elephant in the room with bleached eyebrows, and that is Lady Gaga. That's because in this episode, she's revealed to be not even the fun kind of evil character, but the boring, stupid kind of evil character. There's a hilarious 70s flashback. It's so funny because they really are trying it, and I mean, obviously they think it's over the top. Obviously they had some idea that this period of the 70s was just so completely over the top, and in many ways it was completely over the top, but not quite to the level that they take it to, and it's really laughable. Gaga is clearly trying to act her heart out, but she's just not very good at it. Given she's about on the level as most of the rest of the cast this season, but Jessica Lange she isn't. And speaking of Jessica Lange, I have to say that after watching a film called Daughters of Darkness, which actually touches on the Elizabeth Bathory, or Bathory, I'll put a picture here so you can see. As you can see, this is what we would have if we had had Jessica Lange in this character this season. You can see exactly what they would have done with her. And the actual film does revolve around a hotel and meetings at a hotel. It has John Carlin in it from Dark Shadows, Willie Loomis, and cameo appearance by Willie's Willie. I would recommend Daughters of Darkness because it's an interesting film. It's very low-key. It's a different take on vampires, which is good. It's very neat. I like that fact about it. It doesn't really fall into a lot of the stereotypical things about vampires, but at the same time, it also doesn't work in a number of ways. It's worth seeing once at least, though. But the ending is crap. So, when the Countess kisses John Carlin's character goodbye in front of the hotel, and you will know when this happens, just consider that the ending and turn it off. Because if you keep going, you'll wonder where the hell this ending came from, and why did it have to ruin a perfectly serviceable film. But I bring this up because, well, Gaga is terrible. She decides to hit the junkie model, which is stupid, and they really try hard to make this dude as unlikable as possible. He's not only stupid and boring, he's unlikable. But that's also true for Gaga. She's stupid, boring, and unlikable. She's slutting it up with all these people, and that's fine. Being a slut can be interesting. But not when you're as boring and airheaded as Gaga's character is. She's bringing nothing to the screen. I would like to see nothing more than her character getting staked. Donovan, her boy toy, played by Matt Bomer, who never seems to put on clothes, gets the sole mildly amusing line in the entire series so far when he suggests they stay in for a night of binge-watching House of Cards. This makes him the only remotely likable character in the entire series so far because he actually made a funny. And it wasn't even that much of a funny. Like, it wasn't really even that funny. It was just one of those things where you think, well, he actually has some character now. This is how tragic the show is so far. You don't care about anybody else. You don't really even care about him unless you just really want to see Matt Bomer wiggle around in tiny pants and occasionally make a comment that will make you kind of think that he might be a semi-likable character in some ways. But they really don't commit to the whole vampire thing. I was looking around on one of the busiest wikis of the series this week just to refresh my memory, and I was kind of annoyed that some of the people tend to be treating the whole vampire thing as, oh, it's just some sort of disease where they have to subsist on a diet of sex and blood, and I'm thinking, first off, a diet of sex is ridiculous. Second, yes, there is a disease, if you could call it that, where you have to subsist on a diet of blood. It's called being a vampire. It's called vampirism. Can we just stop trying to pretend we're too cool for vampirism? The show is called American Horror Story, not American We're Too Good for the Horror Genre Story. It pisses me off when people appropriate genres and think they're too cool for it, and try to appeal to an audience that think they're too cool for it. If you're trying to appeal to disenfranchised 15-year-olds, good luck. In any case, everybody else who's watching will think you're a pretentious douche. So the vampires in this show don't have fangs. Big yawn. This could still work, but they also have to avoid any sort of tainted blood because it'll be like a bad flu or worse, and they have to cut their victims themselves, and apparently, judging by the ridiculous 70s flashback, they can't just do that subtly, which is bullshit. Of course, just about anything will take these vampires out. All of this is done in an embarrassing stretch of plot exposition that goes on just short of forever. It's embarrassing, especially since some of it, well, most of it, is done during sex or intimacy, which makes the whole dialogue's delivery seem extremely awkward and strained. If you're going to have a premise, commit to it. Don't just half-ass it and say, oh, this is me, this is my thing, I'm redefining vampirism in my way. It's so artistic. Yeah, well, it's artistic and it's boring as shit. You could and should draw off of the pathos built in to vampirism up to now. In fact, you really need that to make your show remotely interesting, because it's not. You don't even have an interesting show with Gaga slutting it around. She's a boring slut. And I'm not even shaming sluts. Slutty characters are amazing. They can be the source of so much interest in your story. Not when you treat sex like some sort of thing. It's amazing because it's forbidden. And you don't really understand it, but you think it's the most awesome thing in the world. That's stupid. It's dumb. It's uninformed and it's stupid. And nobody is really amused by that unless you happen to have that same sort of sophomoric teenage mindset. And I'm not saying that all teenagers are this way, but a lot of teenagers are pretty fixated on sex. That's the only real audience I can see glossing over the weaknesses of the show because of some mild, extremely mild, sexy scenes. This is like milder than Cinemax in the 90s. Overall, this episode is a big yawn. Just nobody cares. Like 90% of the shit going on in this episode. Nobody fucking cares. None of the characters are interesting. None of them are really likable. Nothing that happens really starts you being interested on anything going on. Mustang Sally is one of the most interesting characters, and she's pretty boring. I don't even like Sarah Paulson as an actress, and I find her character more interesting than the others because she at least seems to be trying. But this is an episode that's an example of everything done as wrong as it possibly could be, and that's what I thought the previous episode was. But I was wrong. It did get worse, and I'm probably not going to watch the third one because as it got worse in episode 2, it's probably going to get even worse in episode 3. I don't like or have any investment in any of the characters. I don't care if they live or die. In fact, I would be very happy if this entire hotel burnt to the ground with every one of the cast of characters inside. Incidentally, that reminds me of something. Everybody keeps talking about how the hotel is falling down, but it's in very good condition. It's in like new condition. There's no indication of it being run down. There's no indication of it even being about to fall down as some of the characters exaggerate it into being. It is a grand, spectacular hotel that looks splendid for its assumed age. And, by the way, the floor wasn't filthy, but you think Gaga could remember into the previous episode where she saved Donovan when he was tripping and asleep on top of a bed, not dying on a filthy floor? There was even a bit of dialogue that expressed that he was exactly where he wanted to be and kind of made it seem like no big deal, because he didn't seem to be in any real distress. But now we're to assume that he was dying on the floor or something. I don't think so. In many ways, that's a lot like the rest of the show. There are lines and assumptions that make it seem like we were supposed to assume different things about what's being presented, but nothing is presented in that way. And there are these huge stretches where you just really want to skip what's happening because it's not interesting. It's not scary, it's not tense, and you don't really care if the character involved lives or dies, which is a failure at horror. Like I said last time, it's a failure at horror. If you don't care whether anybody lives or dies, it's a failure. You have no investment in the circumstances. So my verdict is, give it a miss. In fact, give this whole season a miss. Wait for it to end and see if it gets any better, and then if it does, watch it then. Don't waste your time like I have now. That's 2 hours and some change that I'm never going to get back. And all it is a bunch of boring characters and a shitty twist on vampirism that isn't done even remotely decently. And, just for the record, totally called it on the vampire kids giving the blood to Bathory. Did it in Lamia 5 years ago. Thanks a lot for ripping me off, though, American Horror Story. Forget about it. And that's Late H for this week. What are your thoughts? Comment below, or comment on social media. I've got all my links in the blurb below, so check it out. Please follow me if you like this, and there'll be something more next week. Do you have something you'd like me to watch and talk about? Let me know. I always try and respond to all my comments, and I really appreciate all of them. I'll see you next time. Bye.